Walgreens should be charged with first-degree corporate abandonment.
Yes.
It should be a crime the way they're treating our elders.
Yes.
It should be a crime the way they're treating our families.
A Walgreens spokesperson responding with this statement in part, quote, despite a range of efforts, including previous operating adjustments, these ongoing safety challenges made it increasingly difficult to maintain a secure environment for our team members and customers.
Do right by us.
Walgreens, do right.
Community members, leaders, and families rallied, saying the loss of this Walgreens at 86th and Cottage Grove won't just close a store, it will take away a critical lifeline.
We're not here to beg Walgreens to stay. We're saying that their decision is the wrong decision. And in my opinion, it should be considered a first-degree corporate crime.
Yes.
Because the amount of people that will be hurt by this, the amount of elders that will not have access to health care is evil.
Walgreens says the store is closing due to safety concerns, including theft and violence. But residents say that doesn't match what they see day to day.
The lie that they're telling us is it's a health or a loss prevention issue. When 12th and State Street had loss prevention, they redesigned. Again, this neighborhood is not broke.
The nearest pharmacy will soon be more than a
So there's this Walgreens on 86 in Cottage Grove on Chicago's south side. And when they announced they were closing it down, people lost it. Community leaders, residents, families, they all started saying Walgreens should be charged with what they called, quote unquote, corporate abandonment. They're saying it's a crime the way they are treating elders, the way they're treating families. The narrative was clear. This is abandonment. This is disinvestment. This is corporate greed. But then something happened. Walgreens executives actually showed up and hosted a town hall, and they didn't just make excuses. They dropped the actual financial data. They pulled the receipts, literally showed the numbers on why this store couldn't stay open. So we're going to look at what those numbers actually showed and why this matters for understanding how and why communities lose resources and convenience in the first place. So with no further ado, let's check out this news clip.
Walgreens is revealing some of the specific financial problems that prompted it to close a longtime location on Chicago's South Side. That announcement that the Walgreens at 86 in Cottage Grove will close on June 4th has prompted a major backlash among customers and Chatham residents.
I'm here today because we're closing the store on 86 in Cottage Grove. But I just want to make sure everyone understands, closing stores are not our goal. It's the last resort.
A trio of Walgreens executives, including the manager of the soon-to-be-closed store, explained the company's controversial decision at a community forum hosted by State Senator L.G. Sims.
But if this decision is not going to be reversed, what we want is to understand what is next for this community.
Earlier this week, Walgreens announced the closing of its store at 86 in Cottage Grove, which has served the Chatham community for more than 20 years, creating what many residents are calling a prescription desert and a continued disinvestment in the Black community. Today, the Walgreens executives revealed that store lost more than $1 million last year, partly due to declining prescription sales, but also a massive amount of store theft.
Theft at this store is 16%. That's 4 times above the company average.
Lock boxes help us protect the merchandise in the stores. A lot of the times those lock boxes are getting destroyed, and that's a great cost to the company.
They say Walgreens was spending about $400,000 a year for security guards in the store, but there were still attacks on store employees.
We had people jump across the counters because we do sell liquor behind the counter, taking liquor, cigarettes, things of that. That wears down, not just from the financial piece. I'm more so speaking from just the endurance of that day in and day out.
The store on 75th and State for years did not sell liquor. So why can't that happen here? If that is a problem on 86, why can't you just stop selling liquor?
Walgreens is encouraging people to use the nearest Walgreens store a little more than a mile away, and has sent letters and emails to customers explaining how they can have their prescriptions sent by mail.
For a lot of seniors, there's some solutions that have been put in place immediately with
free delivery that has started already for those medications that you may have that under the law that can be delivered.
So to close it in a community that is filled with senior citizens is a disservice to us. I don't drive. Having to go cross town to get my medicine will be an inconvenience.
So let's start with the biggest number. Walgreens lost more than $1 million at this location in a single year. We're not talking about a slow decline or a bad quarter. This is a store that bled millions of dollars in 1 year. And when you operate a business, you don't get to just absorb losses like that forever. That's not how this works. The executives, as you guys heard, revealed that the theft rate at this store was 16%. And to put that in context, the company average is around 4%. This store was losing inventory to theft at 4 times the normal rate. So what does that actually mean in real money? They were spending around $400,000 a year on security guards alone, just trying to stop people from stealing, and the losses were still happening. $400,000 a year just on security, and the theft was still widespread enough that they couldn't maintain what they call a secure environment for employees or customers. The store manager, who's black, by the way, not that I care about race, but the simple fact is the community wore down, obviously, a store that was beneficial to the community, but the communities are the ones that drive out corporations if they don't care to cherish these corporations who continue to take the day-to-day attacks based on what the community continue to do. So of course they're going to divest themselves and go somewhere to secure financially to be able to keep operations up and running. So, saying all that, with the store manager, who's black, by the way, talking about employees getting jumped across counters, he's describing a situation where people are attacking workers over liquor and cigarettes, jumping the counter, things get stolen constantly. That's not just a financial drain, that's a safety and moral issue or morale issue for people who have to show up to work every single day. But theft alone doesn't explain the $1 million loss. That's another piece. There's another piece that really matters when you're operating in low income neighborhoods. A lot of the customers at this location depend on Medicaid, government insurance. When the government is paying for prescriptions, the profit margins are thin, way thinner than cash sales. The company doesn't make much money dealing with government reimbursement rates. That's just how it works. So you got low profit margins on a huge portion of your sales because of Medicaid reimbursement. And then you layer on top of that massive theft losses, security costs to combat the theft, and then destroy lockboxes and damage merchandise. That's how you get to $1 million in losses. That's not greed. That's the math of a store that can't function in that environment. And you can't stay open when you're losing money faster than you're making it, no matter how much you want to help the community. Eventually, the losses catches up with you and the business shuts down. Now, here's the thing that people miss when they're talking about this closure. The theft that happened at this store wasn't random. It wasn't some natural disaster or unavoidable force of nature. It was a choice. Individual people made the choice to walk in and steal day after day. And those choices happened because they knew they weren't be real consequences. When you have an environment where shoplifting becomes consequence free, where people know the police aren't going to come and arrest them. Mind you, the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, got rid of ShotSpotter to know when shots rang off to be proactive instead of reactive, being there last minute. And also, when you look at teen takeovers specifically happening in Chicago, where it started, and I'm not saying this not happening just in Chicago, but across the nation as well, where these meetups and it's happening on social media platforms like Instagram, where they are basically organizing these meetups in certain states, in certain areas and counties and districts. But you have a mayor that's not cracking down on basically enforcing the law for safety of all in communities and also businesses. And then you wonder why the businesses are fleeing, let alone the taxes. And to make things more simpler, you have the Chicago Bears, the NFL team, who left Chicago, the most biggest investment in which most of the money the city got revenue coming from. So when you lose corporations, when you lose customers, and on top of that, you lose the money coming in from a tax base to benefit the city because you're driving them out, let alone communities driving them out because there's no standard of consistency when it comes to law enforcement. So what do you think was going to happen? Because now it's just a free for all for businesses to be driving out. And it seems as though communities are against business, let alone local legislators, on top of the citizens and communities who obviously vote that way to go against the businesses. because now they're being hammered from crime, taxes, and now communities not caring if they're there to cherish the businesses that are still in their community. So what do you expect? Because the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, instead of cracking down on these teen takeovers, he calls them social gatherings. I'm gonna leave it there. You make what you make out of it. So now, with that being said, that's why my whole point of we know people where people know the police aren't going to come arrest them. Where even if they do get arrested, they're not going to stay in jail. Where the political environment makes enforcement almost impossible. Right? That's when theft gets normalized. And I want to add some context to when I mentioned that they're not going to stay in jail. You want to know why? Because Chicago passed the Safety Act. So even if they get locked up, they're still going to be right back out the same day without no bail. Because in that case, when it comes to Chicago and Illinois or Chicago, Illinois, the Safety Act is basically they eliminate cash bail under the Pretrial Fairness Act. That's a major component of the Safety Act. The Safety Act helps them basically be able to be released with no bail. So basically, with the Pretrial Fairness Act, that's a major component of the Safety Act, judges determine whether a person charged will be released or detained pending trial based on public safety and flight risks. And based on public safety or flight risks, they'll either stay and be detained or released. And it doesn't matter about having a cash bail. There's no cash bail. It's gone. So it's basically determined on how much damage they're willing to do or how much damage they are willing to be in regards of public safety, and then a flight risk if they flee away and won't go to trial or won't go to their court date to basically hear whatever consequences they're gonna get. But if is it a really consequence? Really a consequence if they're getting caught and getting released the same day and they're just being measured based on how much damage they could do, but they don't have to pay no type of fine or consequences to be the standard to get out? If that's the case, if there's no cost to the simple fact of a detrimental action due to irresponsibility, then obviously they're gonna keep doing it because I ain't gotta pay no cash bail anyway. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So where the political environment makes enforcement almost impossible, because I needed to add that context, that's when theft gets normalized. That's what creates the 16% theft rate at this store. The store manager, who is black, talked about employees getting jumped across the counter for liquor and cigarettes. It's not a perception problem or something people are imagining. People are physically attacking workers. That's real violence happening inside the store every single day, and employees have to show up knowing it might happen to them. The political decisions that allow that environment to exist, those are what caused the store to close. Not Walgreens' decision to shut down a location, losing $1 million a year. So maybe, just maybe having a conversation, maybe it just may be that these individuals need to vote better so it won't be a cultivated behavior or influence of enabling behavior that cultivate these things that is acceptable, such as crime, to then drive out businesses, let alone tax them to death. So look at other Walgreens in safer neighborhoods where police enforcement actually happens, where crime isn't normalized. Those stores stay open because they're profitable. They don't have 16% theft rates. They don't have employees getting attacked. The difference between a Walgreens that stays and a Walgreens that closes is the environment it operates in. And that environment is created by policy decisions and enforcement choices made by local government and law enforcement. Local government and law enforcement. When you have local government going against law enforcement, it's not going to work out. Something is going to be lost at a cost, which is obviously public safety. So when people talk about disinvestment, they usually point at Walgreens and call it abandonment. But disinvestment isn't some abstract corporate conspiracy. It's the rational response to conditions that make operating a business impossible. A company will invest in safe neighborhoods when they can turn a profit. They won't invest in neighborhoods where they lose $1 million, not $1 million a year because of theft and violence. That's not racism or abandonment. That's how incentives work. You make a place dangerous and unstable, and businesses leave. That creates fewer jobs, fewer services, fewer opportunities for people living there. That's the real harm. But that harm doesn't come from Walgreens' decision. It comes from the conditions that made that decision necessary. And those conditions are created by individuals committing crimes and politicians who refuse to enforce consequences. So, people in this community are right to be upset. Losing a pharmacy is a legitimate problem, especially for seniors who don't drive, as you just heard. People who depend on quick access to medication, families on tight schedules. That's real. The anger is justified, but the anger is pointed in the wrong direction. Walgreens didn't create the debt problem or the environment where employees get attacked. They responded to it by closing a store they couldn't operate safely or be profitable. That's the response of a company facing unsustainable losses and safety issues. The real accountability needs to go somewhere else. It needs to go towards the people committing the crimes, and it needs to go towards the politicians who refuse to enforce consequences against those people. It needs to go towards the voters who keep electing the same politicians, those politicians. And when you stop arresting people for shoplifting, when you stop prosecuting them, and when you let them walk out knowing nothing's going to happen, you create an environment where this becomes normal. This is what happens when a community prioritizes other narratives over public safety. Businesses need safe environments. That's not negotiable. That's a requirement. And when you normalize death and violence, when you make it consequence free, when you signal through enforcement decisions that this behavior is acceptable, businesses will leave. Then you lose jobs, you lose convenience, you lose services, you lose what makes a neighborhood function. Some will say that that's the company's fault for leaving, but that's not realistic. No business keeps losing $1 million a year to maintain a presence. The choice is clear. Vote for policies and leaders that make it safe to operate a business, or accept that businesses won't stay. This applies everywhere. When theft and violence become normalized with no consequences, businesses leave, jobs disappear, services vanish. That's not cruelty to point out. That's reality. So here's the bottom line. Businesses aren't charity. They're not charity. They are math. When theft eats profits and politics prevents enforcement, stores close. Direct your anger at the criminals and the politicians protecting them. Then vote for safety and accountability. That's how resources stay in your community. It's that simple. But anyway, family, I'll catch you next one. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. Get this video a big thumbs up. It helps crush that YouTube algorithm. I'll catch you in the next one. On that note, family, peace.